I mean, my first book I ever ghost wrote, I turned it in, and 2 weeks later, they asked me to pay the advance back because they were so unhappy with the work. So I did. I wrote a check, and then I laid on the couch for 4 days and watched Reba. And I was like, I'm not a good writer. I'll never get to do this. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. In retrospect, it was a micro fail. Why did I agree to write a book about back health anyway? 9 out of 10 times, the massive failures of last year are micro failures by this year.
Welcome to the No One Ever Told Me podcast, where we talk about the things that no one ever tells you that you really need to know to be successful and to thrive in business and in leadership. Today's guest is Annie F. Downs, a New York Times best-selling author, coveted keynote speaker, and podcast host extraordinaire. But her skill set doesn't stop there. Annie is a builder, and that's why I wanted her to share her story. Her two organizations, Downs Books, Inc., and the That Sounds Fun Network, are absolutely crushing it right now, and her wit and wisdom are guiding them both to massive impact and incredible influence. Listen along as Annie shares her journey from founder to CEO. Let's get started. Annie, thanks for taking time to jump in and
My pleasure.
be
Let's
on
make
this
a
podcast. That's right. You're typically the person on the other side of the microphone
Yes.
asking questions. Do you enjoy being interviewed?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I really like your show. So I really like when I'm on podcasts that I enjoy listening to.
Okay.
Those feel like the most interesting ones to me because I am already into the content.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I'm thrilled about it. Sometimes I don't like being bamboozled by questions. And
Well,
when
buckle
you're
up.
right? So you better watch it. No. And so I'm not worried about that with you, but there are times when you get in this scenario.
Yeah, gotcha.
And the interview is either trying to get you or set you up to win. And you can tell pretty early which is true,
great.
and that tells you where your boundaries are.
Well, let's talk about your business for a second.
Okay.
Because I think
I
you
love
probably
talking about this
I know,
and never get to.
I'm pumped about this because one of the things I think we can talk about today is you're making a really significant transition, that founder to CEO.
Yeah.
And from what I hear through the grapevine, it's going pretty great. So I want to talk about that because I think it's a lot of leaders' journeys to make that step. That's difficult.
So hard.
But let's back up a little bit because
Okay.
I don't know, did high school Annie know that this career path was a possibility? So will you talk about
No.
college and teaching
Yeah.
and how do we even end up in this room?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of things we can lay as groundwork is I didn't know women could lead like this.
Right on.
Even though my mom was the corporate lawyer for Sears. So
Come on.
she was no joke. It's not like I grew up not ever seeing women lead. I just didn't grow up seeing women lead like this.
Out front.
Yes. And as the CEO, as the founder, I just didn't see that very much. And part of that was the 80s, and part of that was my community, and part of that was whatever, and being so involved in the church, to be honest. And so high school Annie didn't even process this as an option. I wanted to teach elementary school. I mean, by the time I had finished third grade, I wanted to teach third grade because I had such a great experience as a third grader.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. I still know my third grade teacher. And I remember pretty much that summer, I knew that's what I wanted to do was teach third grade. I never did. I taught fourth and fifth. But by the time you're 23, you just need a job. So your dreams of teaching third grade because you love third grade kind of or bow to what the elementary school needs.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's when I went to college to study. I went to University of Georgia to study early childhood education, to become a teacher.
Right.
I tried to think back on this pretty decent amount for my own brain. I think when I was 20, when I was halfway through college, if you just said, what will you be doing when you're 40? I would have said, I'll be teaching school. I'll be a wife and a mom, and I'll be teaching school. I didn't even want necessarily at that point to be an administrator. I think if I was still teaching school, I'd be an administrator.
Okay.
But I didn't imagine that. I just imagined being in the classroom for forever.
Did you teach in Georgia or did you teach in
Yes.
Nashville?
I never taught once I moved here.
Okay.
I honestly, when I moved here, this is really weird, Matt. I never made the choice not to teach when I got here. I don't know how to explain it, except the reason I was moving in 2008 is I knew I wanted to pursue writing.
Okay.
And I kind of went like, If we're going all in, we're going all in. If I'm giving up my city and my church and my being around my family and friends, then I'm also going to give up my career and just try.
Okay, so let's talk about that decision for a second.
Okay.
So I was going to ask, was it writing that came first or speaking or podcasting? But it sounds like writing was the first.
Writing, yeah.
Okay. But that's a conscious decision that requires a ton of courage because most people don't like pack their bags and move to a new city.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a whim. What were the inputs that allowed you to make that decision?
That's a great way to ask the question because I think even when people answer the way I answer, it can sound too ethereal if you don't have other inputs.
Right.
So the initial input was I felt like it was a direction from the Lord.
Okay.
As I felt like it was a real invitation of, I've told this story before, I may have said this to you before, but I remember so clearly I was 27 at the time, and I could hear God. I knew God's voice. I know his voice in my life. I just did not know what the words were. I knew the theme, but it sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. Like I was like, I know that's you, and I know there's something about change, but I have no idea what you're saying to me. And so there was literally a day where I sat down on my bed in the house that I owned, in the neighborhood with my two best friends and their families, going to the church where my parents were, living the life I thought I would live the rest of my life. I mean, people don't leave my hometown very often.
Right.
When I go home, I see everyone because they're there. And so it's not a part of the plan.
Right.
So I sat down on the bed and I started listing all these possible changes. And I literally said to the Holy Spirit, like, is one of these it? And I started listing. Have I told you this before?
No.
I started listing like, do I sell my house and I'd sit there? Nope. Do I stop teaching? No. Do I change churches? No. The 25th thing that I wrote, do I move to Nashville? And I knew.
Whoa.
And I didn't write another city on the list.
Were you unsettled? Is that what led to the list?
Yes, I think so. I felt shifty inside.
Okay.
And as soon as I knew, I made up all the excuses. And the clearest one was, I'm unsettled in my life. I'm just trying to find something else. And so here are the other inputs. So I wanted you to have that biggest input so that these other inputs made sense. So then what I did is, this was in October. I was teaching school, so I knew there was no like leaving the next month.
Right.
So at Christmas, I told my parents. And so I had all these stopgap opportunities for someone to close the gate.
Okay.
And I told my parents, and we were driving to see family for Christmas, and I was like, I have this idea. Because I had just prayed from October to Christmas. I just asked the Lord to change his mind. I had said so many times, I know I heard you. I wish I wouldn't have asked.
Wow.
Will you change your mind? Will you make this better? Will you fix this? Please don't make me do this. And finally at Christmas, when it would not go away, I told my parents, and they were like, that sounds like that could be God. And I was like, no, wrong answer. You're supposed to say I've lost it and settle down. And New Year's, I told my three best friends.
Okay.
And they all were like, if you want to be a writer, you can do that in Atlanta. Here's a coffee shop. Here's a da-da-da. And they all like, and I was like, this is what I was looking for. I was looking for someone to step in and stop this thing.
Job's three friends.
Yes. Yeah. And unfortunately, they're much wiser in that. And eventually, by about 30 minutes in the conversation, we were all crying and they knew I was moving. Then I put my house on the market. And in 2008.
Worst time ever, right?
Literally. And so then I was like, joke's on God, because if I can't sell this house, then I can't move. And so at least I was willing. I won't have to do it. And it sold in 16 days for asking price in 2008. And I was like, brutal. So then I end up moving in with my parents in April as a 27-year-old because I have to live in Atlanta for 4 more months. And here I am. All my stuff is in a pod. And I am sleeping on the floor of my childhood bedroom and I'm teaching 5th grade. I'm getting up and going to school every morning and living on my parents' floor because my house sold so quick. So all those inputs, all those things showed that the opportunity was right. Now, my first weekend after I lived here, I went home for a wedding. And I was heartbroken when I had to leave. And I just cried, into my dad's arms. And I was like, I don't want to go back. And he said, you don't have to. You don't have to. You can stay here. We can pay someone to clean up all your stuff and to bring it back down. We don't care. And when I had the opportunity to not go back is when I knew I was going back. Does that make sense?
Okay.
For some reason,
you felt trapped.
That was my last input for me.
Okay.
Was someone is giving me the chance to not do the thing I know I'm supposed to do. And when I'm given the choice, it's like my dad suddenly drew a path that said, you don't have to do what you think you're supposed to do. And I had not considered that yet. And so I went, oh, I don't have to do this.
Okay.
God will still love me. I'll still, once he gave me that option and I went, no, I know what I'm supposed to do. And I came back here. It also reminded me, you can always go back to teaching and you can always go back to Georgia, but this is a chance for you to try something.
Right.
Now I'm pretty firmly planted here.
Sure.
13, almost 14 years later. But I still have a sentence in my body of, I can always go back to Georgia. I can always go back to teaching. I am not trapped anywhere.
That's good. All right. Well, let's talk about the path from books to keynote to podcast and media, because those things make sense looking at them in the rear view.
Yes.
Did they make sense looking at them through the windshield?
Well, here's the truth for speaking and writing is they require each other.
Okay.
To get stages, you have to have books.
Okay.
To get books, you have to have an audience.
When did you know that to be the truth? Did somebody share that with you? Did you figure it out?
You figure out pretty early, especially now. But in 2000, so I moved here in 2008. I signed with my first agent in 2009. We quit working together in 2010 because we got 47 rejections on my first book.
Whoa.
Right. And I have them all.
You got some thick skin.
Right. Well, I mean, what was I supposed to do? Right.
Right.
Okay. And so in 2010, she and I quit working together because I was like, you're not making money. Every publisher, there's not 47 publishers. That's like multiple no's from same houses. And so we quit working together in 10. In 2011, I self-published my first book.
Okay.
Because at
so
that
3
point,
years from moving to Nashville till self-publishing. And that was because of all the no's.
Yeah, because it was like,
wow,
the book is done. I want my grandkids to see that I wrote a book once.
Okay. So God, there's
sorry.
so much in there.
That's
And
why
it's
you can
great.
cut any of this you want to.
Oh, I love it. It's like I talk a lot about courage on this podcast because I think it's important for me to know that people are courageous in the way that they make these decisions. But courage is downstream of conviction. You have to know something in your soul before you can say yes, no matter what.
Yes.
3 years of no's. I mean, some people move to Nashville to play music and they get 6 months of no's and they pack it up and move out of town.
Yeah.
How did you know that you had to stay with it?
Well, what I'll tell you is in 2010, so at year 2, when my agent and I quit working together, I kind of went, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. And that is when, and I really needed that. I needed that to happen because I had moved here and told everyone I was a writer. And this is a gross analogy, but if you imagine tearing a piece of raw chicken, I needed that. I needed God to do that with my identity and my job because I had brought them up here as one piece of chicken.
Okay.
And so I was Annie, but I was Annie the author.
Right.
And so then in 2010, I was like, well, if I'm not that, what am I? And so I had about a year of that ripping of now I need to be known in this town and in my friend group as Annie who doesn't know what she's doing with her life and thought she was moving up here to do this thing. And it's not happening. Then it was the end of 2010 that we self-published because that's when I kind of went if I'm not going to do this professionally, I at least want to put one book out. My blog audience, I had a blog at the time, my blog audience knows that I've been writing. I want my family to have this book. So my parents loaned me the money to self-publish the first book. A year later, and by then I get a job at a nonprofit. I'm doing side hustles. For the whole time I was doing side hustles.
Okay.
I took jobs off of Craigslist. In 2009, Matt, I made $19,000. I thought I made nothing when I taught school.
That's right.
I had no idea that I was about to be 30 and making $19,000 for an entire year. It was, and that was because people were generous to me.
Wow.
And you know what? I wasn't worried once. I was not worried once. It is the funniest thing, right? That's not true. I was probably worried once, but I was not worried very much. It was not on my mind very much. I was like, well, I'm working and I'm making it happen and okay.
Yep.
So 2011, a year after I get self-published, an agent calls me who I don't know and says, can we meet? There's a publisher who's interested in your book and they've come to me because of how many copies it's sold on Amazon by just self-publishing.
Were you paying attention to metrics?
No. I didn't know how at the time.
Right.
I didn't have any idea.
The systems weren't in place for that.
No. And I wasn't doing it to get somewhere.
Right.
Right? Now I am. And now, you know how it works here. We really pay attention to metrics now because we're testing all the time.
Right.
Then it was, here is a passion project I'm going to put out so that it exists. I didn't know anybody was watching. And so that's kind of how this whole thing started. So to get back to the writing and speaking, what ends up happening is so many books sell. Well, I'll just tell you, 2,500 books sold in a year, which is the average is something like the average book sells 2,000 in its lifetime.
Self-published or fully published?
Published.
You beat the metric for published books with marketing behind them.
Yes.
Wow.
And that was interesting to a publisher. So then what happens is Zondervan signs my first book for teen girls, because that's how I started writing, was for teenagers. In tandem, they are a sponsor for a teen girl tour called Girls of Grace. Part of their sponsorship is there is one bunk on the bus for one of their authors. I was the only one who lived in Nashville where the bus left.
Wow.
Can you believe that? So literally, I didn't get the gig because they had ever heard me speak or because I was good. It's because I was the only one who lived where the bus's terminal was.
So really low bar to beat. That's good.
Can she get here in a car and can she sleep on a bus and can she speak? And so that's how that's why to me, they're so inextricably tied because they both started in the same week.
Can we talk about talent for a second? Did you have a knack to write and did you have a knack to speak? Obviously, you've made leaps and bounds, I would imagine, in the last 13 years.
Yes.
But was something core in you that knew you could do those things?
Yeah, I think so. I grew up loving reading and writing. Okay. And I talk all the time. You know this. I mean, I like storytelling. I like being the one entertaining people. And so even in my Georgia life, I mean, I had started writing and doing some speaking in Georgia that led me to even consider moving to Nashville and pursuing this. Okay. I had done enough that I thought I might be able to make something of this. I had been to writers' conferences. I had our youth pastor was sick one Sunday and asked me to teach. So
you'd poked around. You made a little investment. You had tried a little bit. You practiced.
Yeah, I made to me a very expensive investment when I had paid to go to like a big deal writers' conference in California and take a week off of school. Okay. I mean, I had really gone, could I really do this? And honestly, I was writing on the side my last year of teaching, and it just got to where I couldn't do both. So I was like, well, I'm 27 and single. If I'm going to go all in on this thing, I'll be the only one who loses everything. And I can come back home, right? And I can do this. And so that's kind of how so yes, they both already existed. When I moved here, they literally released, or my first speaking was in Phoenix, Arizona with Girls of Grace. And it was the same week the book came out. That book
sounds pretty strategic.
Yeah, but you know what's hilarious, which it won't surprise you at all. This is how the Lord works because the books never showed up at my first event. They got shipped to the wrong place.
Perfect.
Empty table, your first big event. You're the sponsor slot. So you're not even like part of the family yet. You're the sponsor slot. Oh, it was just never showed up. But I heard counselor Stephen James say, he was talking about professional athletes, and he said, talent gets you there, obsession keeps you there. And that, as I've ruminated over that the last couple of days, that has felt very true about me and what I do. Okay. There was enough talent to get me here. I am not the finest writer or finest speaker or finest podcast host anyone's ever known, but I might be the most obsessed with doing this.
That's incredible.
I think that's probably true.
One of my favorite leaders always says, no one can care more about your thing than you do. The second someone cares more about it than you do, as a leader in your organization, it's probably done.
Yeah, that's right.
You get to obsess the most.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that is helpful for me. Ann Voskamp says a similar thing. She says, no one cares about your book more than you do. And so then when you're like, well, why is no one checking the thing at 4 a.m.? You're like, well, because no one cares as much as you care. No one's ever going to care as much as you care. Why is that spelled wrong? Or why is that design, why does that gradient from green to blue have that one weird line in it? No one cares as much as you care. But that's great.
That's right.
No one's obsessed with this company and its growth and the work we get to do like I am.
Right. Okay. So there had to be a shift at some point because how many books have you written?
I have written 8 trade books under my own name, 3 Bible studies, and I've ghostwritten 4 books.
My gosh. That's
I wanted LASIK, so I had to do some ghostwriting. I wanted some money that I didn't put into the company that I could just make and use.
I had a genuine curiosity about how you learn how to negotiate publishing contracts. But then once you told me your mom was the corporate attorney for Sears, like, I know your secret now.
No, you get an agent.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I know how to read them.
Do you care? Do you talk strategy and negotiation on the deal structure?
I care. I read it and make sure it makes sense. I care most that we are able to do the work we want to do. And so I look more at like dates when things release. And I mean, I need to care about percentages. I need to care about advances. The more books on a book deal, the higher the advance, right? Because they work with you longer. A lot of people, for my first 5, I did 1 book deals because I just wanted, pay me, here's the book, let's talk about it again. Pay me, here's the book, let's talk about it again. I wanted to sell through. I wanted to get to where we were getting mailbox money. And we've done that with all of those. Then I did a 2-book deal and we sold through that. And so we're getting mailbox money on that. And then I had different goals. I wanted a longer investment, a longer partnership. I wanted more money up front to do you have to have money to make money, unfortunately. And we needed some money to build out our office, to build out a better podcast studio. And so we have an 8-book deal with this publisher currently. And so when we're looking at contracts, I really care about the contract matching the goals that we're trying to hit.
That's so smart. I love that. When you think about a sales funnel, you have your podcast audience, you have your book audience, you have your keynote audience. Is there a picture in your mind of how you get people through the funnel to a product?
Yes. In a 5-day week, 4 days a week, I'm thinking about meeting new friends on social media and reaching new people. Let me change that. 3 days a week, I'm thinking about reaching new people. 1 day a week, I'm thinking about activating all the people I'm reaching. And 1 day a week, I'm thinking about selling something to them. And moving them down the funnel. If you go after money and sales, you will not have influence. You'll probably get money. You won't get, your influence will not grow at the rate your money grows. Sometimes that's right in our world. Sometimes that's starting a Patreon. Sometimes that's doing a Substack newsletter where people pay. And you would rather write to 100 people where they've paid you $10 a month than to 1,000 people who pay you nothing. Okay. Our current goals are not that. Our current goals are going after influence. The more influence I have, and I think this is actually more gospel if you want me to tell the truth. For us, if we're going after gospel work, we need a lot more ears. The money will follow. The money will follow.
You're talking about impact over sales, right?
I'm talking, yes. Well, maybe even not over sales, but impact will lead to sales.
That's right. I feel like this was a Truett Cathyism, and I could be wrong. But the line is something like this, and I'll probably butcher it, but he who helps the most profits the most.
Yes.
And so on the other side of what we're talking about, and sales goals and metrics and sales funnels.
And we have all those.
You help people. So let's talk about the product that you actually deliver. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah. You well listed our 3 legs to the stool that Annie does. Annie writes, Annie speaks, Annie podcasts. Now, the other stool is the That Sounds Fun network. So we have another business that runs out of this office.
This is going to be a 2-hour podcast.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I want to talk about
But I can tell you how we got there.
That's what I want to know.
Using the same thing.
So good.
In each of these areas, in writing, speaking, and podcasting, we offer free things. You offer something in every area of what you do that people can just have. That's why Costco offers you free samples when it's not COVID.
And let's go right now.
And it pays off every time because I will buy those taquitos after I taste them. Right. I offer something for free in every area. Because there is a portion of the world that can afford Instagram and cannot afford anything else. And I want to be their friend too.
That's great.
My friendship is not limited to what you can pay here. There are levels of what you get based on your income because I have an income and I have a team and we have, I'm listening to a podcast right now that he's reading the Bible every day of the year. And for the first 2.5 months, he didn't mention this at all. And just in the last 2 weeks, he started saying, thank you guys for listening. It doesn't cost anything for you to listen, but it does cost to make this show. Here's how you can donate if you want to. And I thought, man, that is, I wonder what happened The show didn't start costing more. What happened that made you want or need to start asking? So I say that to say we don't ask for anything podcasty for people to pay, because Jimmy Fallon doesn't ask me to pay anything to watch a show.
Right.
And that's the world I want to swim in. I don't want an exclusive community of podcast listeners.
That's great.
Some podcasts do. That's what a Patreon is. That's not what I'm looking for. I want to be Jimmy Fallon. Advertisers pay money for me to be a Jimmy Fallon of podcasting.
That's right.
When it comes to speaking, you can come hear me. You can watch me speak more times than anyone should on the internet, right? Like you can go on YouTube, and I'm everywhere on YouTube. You can come to Crosspoint, and luckily y'all allow me to be part of the teaching team. I'm very honored by that. So you can come hear me teach at Crosspoint. There are conferences around the world that have me come in and don't charge people to sit in. Great. When you come to my tour, where we have curated what we find to be the most enjoyable event, that's a ticketed cost.
That's great.
I write all the time on Instagram. I write all the time on Twitter. I write all the time on Facebook. And we have free downloadable things. If you like that, we have books out the wazoo. So in everything, we try to help first. And that if that is all you want or all you can afford, I hope I meet some of your needs. Right? The moving them down the funnel is the trick and is the thing we want to do, because I want to be as impactful as I can.
Right.
The reason we started the That Sounds Fun network, which a podcast network is very similar to a television network. So think food TV, right?
That's great.
So think you're going to flip on that channel and all the shows are different, but there is something similar about them.
Absolutely.
And so with a podcast network, advertisers come to us just like Kraft Cheese goes to Food Network and says, okay, we think these three shows, we think Paula Dean's show, and we think they're going to eat the most cheese. So can we advertise on those?
Who's the Guy Fieri of the That Sounds Fun podcast network?
Carlos Whitaker. Without question, it's Carlos Whitaker. I wish it was me. But the reason we started it, Matt, is that I kept having experiences at networks that I knew could be better experiences.
That's great.
And I thought, what are we doing? We're giving up a big percent of our advertising revenue to have a less than experience.
Doesn't work.
Build it. Let's build it. What are we doing?
That's a pretty recent development, right?
It's almost a year old on Cinco de Mayo of a network.
Unbelievable. That's so good.
It's unbelievable. So but I am a builder. I thrive when I'm building. I do not thrive when I'm maintaining.
I was about to say, some people love that phase, the building phase, and some people love the management phase. Mm-hmm. You're the builder, right?
Yeah. So you know what's been interesting, Matt, is in the last couple of months, because I am out of work hours and we have more work for me to do than I have work hours. Now, let me be clear. I'm not out of hours. I'm out of work hours.
Yeah, that's right.
I do not work 12 hours, 15 hours a day. I do not work 7 days a week.
Well, you probably had those seasons, and they're just not now.
Absolutely. I had seasons where I worked more. I will, no matter how much we grow, I will not do that again.
That's great.
It's not healthy. It's not long-term success. So I'm out of work hours. And so what we've had to do, which is really hard, is we sat down, my team and I sat down and looked at everything I've built or we've built, and the things that I really love and feel invested in, we have put someone else in charge of them to grow them.
Is it hard to hand the baton off? Something that was
No. Once I've built it and I can't run anymore, I love handing the baton off. Please tell me how I can help this be successful, but you go. So Taylor Ann Dietrich, who goes to our church, she just stepped in to run our mini BFF book club, which is just like a little Monday night reading to kids thing that started during COVID, but it has a lot of breath behind it.
Yeah.
And so we pay her a little bit to work 1 day a week to help grow a thing that I don't have the capacity to grow. Unfortunately, there were 3 other things I've built in the last year that I really love that we have had to shutter because there is not a path where someone else can grow it, or there is not a passion in me to use our resources to have someone else grow it.
That's right.
And so even though I love them, we have to stop them because I love building to a point, and then there's a crossroads.
Right.
And the crossroads is Annie backs up now, and either someone else maintains and grows and makes it a thing, or it stops. And 3 of the things that I've really enjoyed this year are stopping.
Did you know this was in you? Because we're talking about a completely different skill set than writing, speaking, and hosting a podcast. You're running a multifaceted, multiple team, multiple division company.
Yeah. That's so dumb,
Did you
right?
know that was in you?
No. No, I mean, I think all of us who grew up in the 80s dreamed of the Babysitter's Club. All the girls did. I won't be sexist. Maybe some of the guys did too. So like that, I thought of stuff like that, like having a T-shirt company with my neighbor. We drew up the plan in the back of the bus, but I didn't see this. I know how to be bossy.
Yeah.
I make very fast decisions. I don't always make the best decisions, but I make very fast decisions. So, and I'm a natural leader. I was the president of my high school. I always was on student council. So leadership has always been a part of my life. I still don't necessarily know how to run a company. I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I study what you do and what you teach us. I mean, the downside for the audience is one of these days we need to turn the show on you and make you the guest and me the host, because
one day, someday,
they don't get to see what I get to see of how well you lead. So I watch you. Because this isn't. This is natural to me, but so the talent is there to some degree. I don't have the skills to back it up quite yet.
Well, sometimes there's danger and refinement there because you lose your edge.
Yeah.
So there's just a balance to walk as a leader.
So a year and a half ago, there were 2 of us on this staff.
That's crazy.
And now there's 9.
I mean, that's
exponential
growth.
And the problem, Matt, is that as we started needing hires and as we started having the ability to do that, it was me and all my staff.
Yes.
And so we were not a pyramid at all. And so luckily, because God is kind to me and sovereign, your wife, who is an actual expert on staff cultures and how to have a healthy staff in an environment in a corporation, works for me part-time. And we just brought her in full-time to start that pyramid thing so that I do move from founder and everything to just CEO. And so she'll come in and lead staff, and I will be over her. She will be over the team. And I think that's going to even give us more juice to grow and to have boundaries. But you say, did I know how to do this? Well, no, because look, I built it wrong. And then all of a sudden you go like, oh, this isn't a successful system. And so my guess is, Matt, if we talk about this again at the end of 2021, my guess is we're going to have a pretty steep learning curve. Yeah. And we're going to have some growing pains over the next 3-4 months as Ashley steps in and actually builds a culture with a handbook and all the things I didn't build correctly the first time because I just thought, we need help, come do this. We need help, come do this. Right. And so we're going to, including me, it's going to be hard for me because I'm handing off a lot of my control. But the only way this thing succeeds is if I'm the only one who doesn't leave. And if something happens to me, if I can't maintain this and I burn out, all these wonderful people lose their job and our audience loses a voice that matters to them.
Does that feel like pressure?
It feels like pressure to do it well. It doesn't feel like pressure that I can't stand up under.
That's great.
It feels like pressure to like, don't keep, once you know better, do better. Once you know better, do better.
What's the best business advice you've been given?
Oh my gosh. When I read E-Myth Revisited and really had to work through, I probably did this 7 or 8 years ago. And I'm sure most of our friends listening have read it, but if they haven't, it is the question of, are you franchising? Are you building a business that dies with you? Within my field, there are a handful of people who have chosen to, quote, franchise their work. So Dave Ramsey at Ramsey Solutions. He is a personality. He has 5 personalities under him. Lisa Turkhurst at Proverbs 31. There's some of these people who have built things that will outlast them. Yep. So I had to decide, is Downs Books a company that will last after me? And the interesting thing is now I've built one of each.
Yeah, that's right.
Downs Books dies with me. When I decide to stop writing books and stop doing podcasting and stop speaking at events, this company does not exist. That sounds fun, the network. I hope it lives, I hope in 200 years, it is still forging the next technology and building a community around the creators like we're doing now.
Well, Downs Books could start the publishing division, and then Downs Books lives forever through future authors.
Well, the real is the reason it's not called a That Sounds Fun podcast network is because we want to be able to network in a lot of different things.
There you go.
So we hope to have television. We hope to have a publishing wing. We hope that That Sounds Fun is the actual juggernaut.
That's great.
Like that. And Downs books can go. I don't care if people remember me.
What makes for a good interview when you're a podcast host? What does the interviewee need to do? What does the interviewer need to do for like a successful? What are some of your most favorite interviews you've done?
The thing a guest can do is know what the expectations are going in.
That's great.
So when I'm a guest, I ask things like, who are we talking to?
Yeah.
How long are we talking? Is there anything specific that you were hoping I would talk about? If you don't have a book release or if you don't have a something, then you go, hey, why am I a right guest at this time? What is it you're looking for me to do? Because what if they're looking for you to talk about an Instagram post you put up that's really vulnerable and you don't want to do an interview about it, but you don't ask? You're going to get bamboozled. And so as a guest, know the expectations of the audience that you're trying to reach. As a host, I'll tell you the thing that I like. Put my flag on the top of the mountain to other podcast hosts is do not have guests on because you are trying to gain their audience. Have guests on because they give something to your audience.
That's great.
It is, when I had Jennifer Garner, like alias Jennifer Garner, Ben Affleck's ex-wife Jennifer Garner, big deal Jennifer Garner, barely a bump in listens because she came on to serve my audience.
That's great.
She served it. They loved it. People went nuts. She did not share the show. I didn't expect her to.
Right.
Because I've learned, I've been podcasting for 8 years. I learned painfully that if your expectation is this big deal guest is going to tell all their people to come listen and I'm about to gain 1 million listens, you are going to be disappointed.
Yeah, that's right.
Even if they share.
It's an unhealthy expectation because
That's right.
that audience may not cross over well.
And do you know what it makes me feel as the guest? When I'm the guest and I feel like the host had me for my audience, I'm like, did you care about our conversation at all? Or are you just trying to, when people follow up for me to share, I don't mind at all because sometimes that's totally appropriate. But when I have a book launch, I've done 35 podcasts in a week. I can't share all those.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. And so it is instead, and there's some give and take. There's, hey, we're about the same size podcast. You come on mine, I'll come on yours. There's a lot of good strategy like that. That's fine. But your heart should be this guest, no matter how big they are, what can I ask them that serves the audience that I have and know? I'm not trying to get their audience. So I'll tell you a perfect example is I just interviewed Harry Connick Jr. Is that not like...
That's amazing.
And I was so nervous. I told Ashley, I told our whole team, I woke up multiple times the night before. I'm so tired of being nervous. I've been nervous for 2 months. I'm exhausted with doing things that make me nervous, which is wham. But I just feel, I'm so tired of my stomach being in a knot because I got to do something that feels hard. He was incredible. I did not ask him things that his audience wants to hear. So we didn't talk about how a jazz musician makes a piano and a guitar go together. I asked him about how his dad taught him about the Holy Spirit because that's what my audience wants to talk about.
That's good.
They want to hear people they know and love talk about their faith.
Okay.
And talk about their faith journey. So my job, he's one of my most favorite ones as of recent because he appeared to be having an experience with me of these are questions I'm not used to being asked and I'm enjoying that. Sometimes they don't enjoy it.
That's right.
But he seemed to be enjoying it because I've done this for a long time. I'm 500 episodes in and I know what my audience loves talking about. And I have learned the skill, the talent is there, the obsession is there. The skill that I've learned has taught me how to massage the questions so that it fits for them and my people.
You just breezed over something really important. You said 500 episodes. By the time you factor in recruiting a guest, interviewing a guest,
I'm still not at my 10,000 hours, I don't think.
You've got to be so close, I would imagine.
Maybe. Yeah, probably between guest and making, I'm close.
And then promotion,
Oh, yeah, promotion. I'll tell you what, I've got my 10,000 hours in.
That's
Insta
right.
story.
That's right.
I've got I know, when you start really doing something, you never realize how long it takes to get to 10,000 hours until you're actually doing it.
Brutal.
It's brutal. Let's say at best, if I put 2 hours, that's 1,000. If I put 2 hours, I'm a tenth of the way there. And I had to, dear everybody, I had to use my calculator. So that's fine.
It's okay. You've got people to do that for you.
No, don't let me do that. Someone else calculate this.
So
I'm a tenth of the way there. If we're just purely talking about interviewing.
Yeah.
That's awful. And that's saying 2 hours, which I don't talk to most people for 2 hours.
Let's talk about leadership sacrifice, because one of my favorite leadership quotes is that as you go up, there are just things you give up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people look at results and go, I want results. But very few people look at results and go, I'm willing to make the sacrifice.
Well, nobody really knows the sacrifice, right?
Right.
Number one, it's very individual.
Okay.
So what another author, speaker, podcaster loses or gives up in exchange for what they get is not the same as me. And so it's almost hard to even say, here is what this is going to cost you.
Sure.
But yes, I mean, I think I walked into work this morning. This is a great example. We've had this one dream venue of mine on hold for this one particular date. And it is the dream venue. And this is kind of the only year we can probably do it because of how many are seated in it.
Yeah.
Yesterday, someone asks me to officiate their wedding on that day.
No way.
The only day I have blocked in the next 8 months after our tour in June. The only date I'll get a chance to do that venue. So what's the cost to me? I just gave up my dream venue for one of my people. That's a cost.
Yeah.
That is absolutely worth it. But that kind of stuff happens. For a lot of years of my career, when I was traveling 2-3 weekends a month, the cost was the wedding. I missed a lot of weddings.
Yep.
And because if this would have been 2015, my fall is already booked.
Right.
And I didn't quite have the gumption or the desire to cancel speaking on behalf of weddings. I go, I'm so sorry. I'm already booked that weekend, but can I take y'all to dinner? I'm so sorry. Blah, blah, blah. Where I am in my career now, I am able to make a different cost choice.
Okay.
But privacy is a cost.
Sure.
My parents get approached at restaurants and they didn't sign up for this.
What?
There's shrapnel to me being a public figure that I didn't know my friends and family were going to have to pay.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 10 years now publicly. We have learned how to do things differently so that everyone feels mostly comfortable. But that's a cost I pay. I mean, people have found out where I lived and left really lovely notes in my door. And, I'm very grateful. And also, if the nice ones have found me, have the others too. And, there's things like that it's just part of the cost.
We'll just go to the title question for a second. What's the most important thing you know now that no one ever told you on the front end of this entire journey?
No matter what job you're doing, if you are a person of faith, the goal is to further the gospel.
Okay.
No one told me, there's going to be two sides to this coin. No one told me how much fun it could be to build companies that pay on time, that are generous, that are comfortable for people, that are a safe place for people, that are I didn't know how much fun it could be to build a really fun company. We're not called a ministry on purpose.
Okay.
We are. When I die, I don't want people to say I ran a really good ministry. I want people to be like, she was a great businesswoman.
I love that.
And so no one told me that furthering the gospel could look like being a really great businesswoman who made a great working environment or tried to make a great working environment for as many people as she could. The other side of the coin is no one has told me that giving your life to further the gospel could feel like losing some things you really wanted. And it does. You miss out on things when you're at the top. And we had a really hard conversation here with a couple of my coworkers a couple of weeks ago where we all kind of realized at the same time, like, oh, not everyone thinks about what Annie thinks about. Like, they don't lay awake at night making sure we're going to have enough income for everyone.
If you're taking notes at home, that was a significant moment. That's right. When you're the boss, you just carry something that not everybody else carries. And
I don't know that I don't even know that I knew that as much until we
have to experience that. That's right.
That no one in fact, when we put the tour on sale, we have a tour coming up in June. We put the tour on sale, and a friend of mine who's a big deal headliner texted me the night before, and he said, no one is going to understand the anxiety you feel every day when a tour is on sale, but I know.
Wow.
And I thought, man, and 24 hours later when the tour was on sale, I said, you are right.
Yep.
No one here, even the number 2 person who's running the tour, she's like, it's not my face. It's not my name. She said it at lunch yesterday. She was like, it's not my face. It's not my name. I don't know what you feel. I don't think anybody could have prepared me for the silly, it's lonely at the top thing.
Yeah.
But it's lonely at the top.
That's right.
Nobody in this building gets this, what I feel.
I think they, air quotes, they don't tell you that because it might scare some people off that really need to be there.
And it just doesn't, yes, that sentence, it's lonely at the top, does not come close to describing the experience.
Wow.
Right? I mean, it's lonely at the top. It's 5 words that, and I picture a hill with a person standing on it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come close to the experience I have after work when I drive home and I'm still thinking, or I still have 3 things to process, and we've got a situation to deal with, and we're trying to hire, and we're,
Yeah. Well, people that have never had to make a payroll
yeah,
just don't understand what the pressure feels like
Yeah.
to write those checks.
Yeah, that's right. And someday...
And that's okay. They didn't sign up for that.
Totally. And there are benefits to being at the top too, right?
100%.
Like, I can decide that I'm not going to work on a Friday and they all have to come in.
That's right.
Fine. So there are absolute benefits. I am not complaining. I'm choosing to build these companies, and that's why it's 2 sides to the same coin. I'm having an actual ball. This is the most fun professionally. I couldn't have dreamed of this much fun, Matt. I had no idea how cool this could be. The way people send us letters and the way people interact with me on social media, the way they're going to show up at tour.
What are some non-revenue metrics you pay attention to? So in one organization I work in, we talk about stories being a currency.
Yeah.
Like, hey, when we get stories, we know we're doing something right.
Yeah.
Do you have a similar non-revenue metric you pay attention to? Engagement? How do you guys quantify that?
Yeah, I think how people hit reply when we ask them to hit reply on an email we send every week, what they say when they see me in public, the letters we get, the way people walk up and say, I feel like we're best friends, the way they know my staff's name. You know, when people say, when we announce we're all going to Dollywood, and they say, is Craig going to be there? Is Ashley going to be there? Is Jenna going to be there? Because the people on the other side of our work care about my team.
They're bought in.
Yeah.
It's a loyal
That's
audience.
the stuff.
Okay.
We don't metric that per se. We appreciate that.
I love that.
We metric who opens emails and what percent opens emails and sales. And, that when you put a tour on sale and there's only 100 VIP tickets in every city, you pay attention to who has access to these tickets and how many of the VIPs go to them. Do you know what I mean? Because only certain people had access. I like testing everything, Matt. Everything to me is an experiment. If we say this and swipe up to this, how many people are going to go?
Does it work? Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the tour, we went like, okay, here are the people that are going to have access. We're only going to say it on the podcast. And let's see what happens. Okay, now we're only going to say it in an email. Let's see what happens. Now we're only saying it on Instagram. Let's see what happens. And I love all that. So those are the metrics we measure. If the stories stop, if the people coming up to me stops and the metrics are still good, I'm concerned.
Okay. Who are you still learning from? I mean, because you're in such a unique field. I don't know that there's a ton of mentors for an industry like this. But you mentioned some books you're listening to, some podcasts you're listening to.
Yeah.
We have a lot of leaders that are just hungry to learn. They've got that curiosity. They want to know more.
Yeah.
What are you filling up on right now?
So this is one of the problems is I do have my hands in so many buckets.
Yeah.
So when it comes to my church leadership and my faith leadership, Carey Nieuwhof, I like how he knows some stats on what's going on.
Okay.
He gives us real here's the numbers.
Analytical.
What are we going to do with it? Yeah.
That's great.
So he's probably the faith guy I listen to. When it comes to how I'm building my business, I am watching. Who am I watching? I love any kind of businessy podcast that tells me Are you thinking about this? Jenny Catron, you. Yeah. I like Donald Miller. There's some of their episodes that I really like at Story Brand. When I'm thinking about Annie F. Downs as a person that people connect with, which is me, but also a brand, I'm watching Jimmy Fallon. I'm watching to see how because we have the same smell, he and I.
Okay.
Jimmy Kimmel, you know that he is very cool. Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, they both have a we should be here vibe.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon has he's just one of us vibe. He's very good at his job. He's a professional, but he doesn't ever play it cool. When there's a guest on that he thinks is funny, when he calls everybody pal and he means it. So I watch him because he feels like our friend who's getting some cool experiences.
I love that.
And that's who I want to be too. I feel like that's how we smell the same. It'll look different because of my faith background and because that's written into my code so much as a human. So I'm watching him. There's some podcasters I really enjoy listening to because of how they do their work.
Yep.
I think Brene Brown is worth watching. There's a podcast called Smartless. Do you listen to it?
No.
It's not rated friendly, but it's because they use big boy language. But it's Will Arnett and Sean Hayes and Jason Bateman. So they just have an interesting show. They have interesting interview skills. So, yeah, I'll listen to just about any. Seth Godin is a big voice who's always like him teaching me how to build the word he uses is tribe, how to build that. He has been a voice that has really mattered to me.
I can see that. His DNA in some of these things.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. Oh, you will see him. Do you know my story about Seth Godin?
Mm-mm.
I'll tell you very fast. In 2010, he held a nano MBA that was a week, and it was for 10 people, and you could not take notes. And you had to apply, and then you had to interview in person in New York. And I did. I applied. I made it to the interview round. I flew to New York. I rode the train to where he lives. I walked in the rain to his office and was an absolute drown rat when I got there. And he picked me. Anyway, so there was 10 of us in the room, an incredible room of people. We weren't allowed to take notes.
What was the no notes thing about?
He says you never take notes on first dates and you remember everything. And he said, why take notes? So what we would do is we wouldn't take any notes. We'd get on the train to go back to the city, and all 10 of us would sit right next to each other and write down everything. Do you remember what he said about that and what he said? So we got it all. But he really shaped me and how I build business and how I lead over those 10 days. I mean, that's as close to an MBA as I'll probably get.
And that's like CEO lottery you just won.
No kidding.
Like that's the golden ticket. You are Charlie Bucket.
And do you know we had to come home and we all had to create a project. And at the time I worked for Mocha Club, a nonprofit here in town. I was with them a little more than part-time. So this was before I had self-published. This was the season between quitting my job or quitting with my agent and self-publishing. So we had to create something to implement at the company. And mine failed miserably. And the idea was right. And he wrote about it in one of the books. It starts with my friend Annie.
No way.
Works at I think it even says Annie Downs because when it came out, people were like, "Is that you?" I think it's even my friend Annie works at a nonprofit and she tried this idea and she took it back and it didn't work. And it didn't work for a lot of reasons I couldn't control and maybe some I could. So much of what I do is because Seth Godin taught me all that then and is still really a big part of my life.
Okay. If you're writing a letter to 25-year-old Annie, what encouragement would you give her to get to here?
I don't know that I would tell her any of this. I think you can't. It's the same as if 60-year-old Annie could come back and tell 40-year-old Annie things. I'd be like, if you tell me I'm still not married, if you tell me, you just can't know how much you'll love some pieces of it because of the tragedy you'll have to go through in some of it ahead of time. So I don't know that I'd tell her very much. I may tell her, if I could talk to 18-year-old Annie, I'd tell her to take some business classes at college.
That's great.
That'd probably be the biggest difference. Just because I'd like a little more, I mean, besides Seth, I don't have any training in business. And my dad's brilliant. So my dad and my mom have helped me a ton, not even financially, though some. They've helped me mostly with how to build a business. We had a thing happen here that I got in the car and called my dad, and I was like, you've had employees for forever and you've run a business. How do I do this? And is that something you talk about on a Wednesday, or do you wait till a Friday? And I don't know. I'm just trying to write books. I didn't mean for this to happen. And so I don't know that I'd tell her very much, Matt. I don't know that I would just tell her to trust the process. Trust what's coming and trust the failures. Someone yesterday said to me, failure is mandatory.
That's right.
And I think I needed him to say that to me when we're not failing in big ways. We're always micro failing. I mean,
That's right.
That not enough people clicked on that post or whatever. Micro failing's great. Fail a lot. I'm in a writers group and we meet every other week. And we were just meeting right before I'm talking to you. And we were talking to one of the girls. She was like, I can't figure out whether people like to engage with me here. And we're like, put the same content in all three places and trace it. Micro fail.
That's right.
Figure the two that aren't worth your time.
Where'd you pick up micro fail? Because we talk to a lot of leaders, and one of the differences that talking to these guys and gals, they're just so comfortable making these failures. It's fun. I'll fail, and I won't make that mistake again. I'll do it different next time.
Yeah, because you know what? You think when you fail, you're going to lose all your money.
Yeah.
And you think when you fail, you're going to lose. I'm not near as concerned about losing my influence as I am about losing my money.
Yep.
Because a lot of people depend on me showing up here. And so once you fail a couple of times and the money is still there, or the thing you thought you lose is not gone, or the thing that is gone does not feel the way you thought it would, then you're willing to try again. Once you survive, I mean, my first book I ever ghost wrote, I turned it in, and 2 weeks later, they asked me to pay the advance back.
Oh my gosh.
Because they were so unhappy with the work. So I did. I wrote a check, and then I laid on the couch for 4 days and watched Reba. And I was like, I'm not a good writer. I'll never get to do this. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. In retrospect, it was a micro fail.
That's right.
Why did I agree to write a book about back health anyway? To try to pay a few bills that I wanted to pay off. Like,
I would have read that book, but that's a different story.
I can still get it to you. Someone else wrote a better version. But, maybe the reason people are afraid is they forget that 9 out of 10 times, not 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10 times, the massive failures of last year are micro failures by this year.
That's right.
1 out of 10 times, something really bad's gone down and it's going to be hard to recover from, whether it's a tragedy or a sinful decision or dishonesty is always going to cost you.
That's right.
Little yeses that are lies or little yeses. Every big yes that costs a pastor his platform or a company owner goes to jail for, or you lose a friend over, that big yes, there were a lot of little yeses that got you there.
That's right.
All those micro yeses, you got to cut those off before you get there. So dishonesty is never one that is like, you'll be all right. You're never all right. Dishonesty never wins. But the rest of the mistakes you're going to make, we're going to be all right.
Okay. One of my guests said it this way, and I'll never forget it. And he said that he teaches this to his 6-year-old. He says, I ask him, what's the difference between failure and growth? And the 6-year-old responds, perspective.
Oh, my gosh.
So the way you talked about, like, last year's failure, this year's like, that's micro.
Yeah.
That got us here. No big deal.
Yes. That's it. And so the problem is people look at you, me, the leaders you've had on. I think about Jenny Reed and Vinnie Louise. And they go, well, if I make a mistake, I'll never have stores like that.
That's right.
If I make a mistake, I'll never have books like that. And you're like, no, the reason we're here is because we've made mistakes. The reason, when you look at my company in a year and the staff is healthy and thriving and growing and looks different, it'll be because I made a mistake in how I hired it.
Yeah, that's so good, Annie. I love that.
But so today we're sitting in the failure. My team is not a failure. There's not a person out there that's a failure. The way I built it is not as successful as it could be. Yeah. In a year, we'll see the growth from my mistakes. Get comfortable failing.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
So you end your podcast with what sounds fun to you.
That's right.
So I'm going to make it terrible and ask a different version of that. What's the least fun thing about being the boss?
Oh, man, what's the least fun thing about being the boss? Is that I'm a person with feelings. the reason that's the least fun thing about being a boss is some days things that have nothing to do with my staff or my job are playing into my behavior. And when April Fool's came around, I kind of gave an all call of like, do not play tricks on me, because I have spent 40 years apologizing on April 2nd for what happens when I feel tricked on April 1st and what it triggers in me. And I just don't want to be that person at work. So the hardest thing for me about being a boss is sometimes I feel like I don't like apologizing for being snippy. I mean, I like apologizing is right. Sure. I hate when I'm snippy or when I'm so part of the problem with being nervous for the last 2 months is sometimes that brings out the worst of me because I'm nervous. Yeah. I'm nervous about Harry Connick Jr., so I snap at you because you got me the wrong protein on my lunch. Like, it has nothing to do with steak and chicken are the same thing. It's two different animals. I don't care. The reason I care is because I'm nervous about Harry Connick Jr. because I don't want to be a failure, because if I fail at this, what happens to our company, what happens to your job, it's not a problem with chicken or steak. Right?
That's right.
And so that's the hardest thing to me about being a boss is that I'm a human with a lot of other things in my heart too.
Going back to the lonely at the top, it's like when you're on that mountain, like you talked about, or the person on the hill, sometimes it's all eyes on you. And no one performs perfectly when the eyes are always on you.
I know. And the bigger the staff gets and the more we're together, the more that happens. And I just feel like the facade is disintegrating every day. And it's wearing me out to see it disintegrate in front of all of us. And so that's hard. That's the hardest part about being the boss right now.
There might be something healthy on the other side of that, though.
There has to be. There must be.
That's good.
When they still choose to work here, I will feel safer.
That's great.
You know what I mean?
Annie, of course, I've got a vested interest in cheering this organization on as my wife is contributing on staff.
The number 2 on staff starting soon.
I love what you're building.
Thank
it's so
you.
fun to watch it from the sidelines. And beyond the content and the help and the friends, I'm just excited to watch you build and spin off and let someone else run it.
Thanks.
You just keep building.
Well, can I ask you one question before we go?
Sure.
If you could tell me to do one thing that I'm not doing, if you could tell me one way to lead better, different, what's one piece of advice you give me based on what you do see and what you do know?
Yeah. I would say you have fantastic instincts and don't doubt them.
Okay.
Test them.
Yeah.
Don't doubt them.
Okay. Thank you.
I think you are tracking so well. Momentum is a crazy, mysterious thing, but this organization has it.
Okay.
You keep pushing the flywheel when you have momentum like this.
Okay. Thank you.
That's great. Annie, thanks so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. I will ask you a lot more questions like that as we continue to go forward in this.
That's great.
Some leaders just have it, and Annie is one of those leaders. In 13 years, she turned those 47 rejections into 2 thriving companies. It's truly remarkable to think about it. I mean, Seth Godin chose her to be in his program and to make a deposit into her leadership. That's unbelievable favor. As I listen back to the interview, a few ideas stand out that I'm going to take with me. Number 1, the failures that seem significant right now, in a year, you'll be able to classify those as micro failures. Time gives perspective, and what got you here, even the mistakes, are an important part of the journey. Number 2, don't take for granted the simple transactions. Understand what value you bring to your tribe and find ways to give it away. Building influence and loyalty is more important than monetizing every single little asset you create. And finally, there's no getting around this. Good leaders are builders. Great leaders give the things they build away to people who can run it for them so they can go and build more things. What thing are you holding on to too tightly that someone else needs to run so you can start the next best idea? I hope you had some favorite takeaways as well. If you did, send me a note on our socials and take 1 minute to rate, share, and subscribe. And make sure you join us for the next No One Ever Told Me podcast.